Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtadar Khan, your host. And today, after several days, in fact, after more than a week, I'm coming to you live. I'm in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Clearly, I've been having a lot of fun here in Colombo. I got a chance to speak at the University of Colombo, met some friends here. I also met a lot of people from various think tanks and got a very interesting Sri Lankan perspective on South Asian politics and obviously on the United States and India. So hello, I think I'm back. This is the hotel transitioning me. I don't know what the internet really is. But anyway, today I'm going to talk to you about the new alignments that are emerging in the Gulf. For example, it is pretty much clear that Turkey is going to join the defense pact that has been signed between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And it is quite possible that we will hear as an announcement to that effect very soon. This creates a very interesting dynamic in the Gulf security, in the Middle Eastern security, especially with the declining power uh, of uh, of Iran, as Iran becomes weaker and weaker, and even as we speak, Donald Trump has threatened. Uh, uh, can you just confirm, Sukhira, that you can see me now? So even now, Donald Trump has been threatening Iran, and so there is a lot of chatter in Washington that Netanyahu is pressuring the United States to essentially go in and bring about regime change in Iran because Iran has definitely become externally weak, and there's a lot of protests apparently going on in Iran. As a result of that, the regime is quite vulnerable, and it could be completely overturned. And I don't know why the Americans are of the opinion that a new regime in Iran will bring stability to the region. Who knows what can happen when such authoritarian regimes fall? Because what authoritarian regimes do really is destabilize the domestic political structures, they weaken the civil society. And so, if an authoritarian regime collapses, there is not enough vitality in domestic institutions to save the country and move forward, and there will be chaos, as you can see what has ensued in Bangladesh in the past few weeks. It appears as if the country is completely out of control and nobody's in charge. Anyway, so as Iran has become weaker in the Middle East, the Iran versus US Israel binary has kind of faded into the background. And so there is a new competition emerging in the Middle East, highlighted by the Saudi attack on weapon supplies by UAE into Yemen. And so you suddenly find that there is a new tension, new competition taking place in the Gulf, particularly between the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates. I mean, these were partners. They went into Yemen together. in order to basically protect uh, Yemen from being completely taken over by the Iranian-backed Houthis. So in many ways, Yemen had become a proxy war between Saudi, UAE, and the Iranians, as the Arabs tried to keep the Persians from intruding into another Arab country, because at that time Iran was pretty dominant in Lebanon and Syria and Iraq. I think what you're seeing is the new alignment. We'll talk a little bit about India much, but I don't see India playing a major role in the Gulf at the moment when it comes to matters of security or in matters of geopolitics. India is more concerned about energy security, about attracting investments from the Gulf. India has a huge diaspora, nearly 1 crore people, which is about 10 lakhs. So over a million people. I think over 10 million people live and work in Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, in all of the Gulf countries. And they send in a lot, billions of dollars of remittances to India every year. So India does not want to upset the apple cart. They want to maintain good relations with all Gulf countries, the UAE in particular, and Saudi Arabia too, because it's a major trading partner. UAE is obviously India's third biggest trading partner after the United States and China. It is quite possible that in a year or two, US, India, UAE trade could even cross $100 billion. That would be incredible for a country like UAE, whose total GDP is less than $600 billion. To have a trade partner with $100 billion trade would be incredible. And even a kind of trade in which I think the UAE has a pretty good trade balance with India. But nevertheless, this is a new development of Turkey uh, joining the Saudi and Pakistani alliance. And I think it is going to be very interesting because there are several things that are resulting coming out of this. So both Turkey and Pakistan are quite developed and advanced military powers. Both of them are now exporting. Apparently, Pakistan is on the verge of sending more than $1.2 billion worth of jet fighters to Sudan, which will be paid for by Saudi Arabia to the government of Sudan. So they are going to be selling JF-17s made jointly with China to Sudan. Saudi Arabia has given a $2 billion loan to Pakistan. And so they're trying to convert that loan into some kind of a purchase of JF-17s, which will be jointly manufactured by China and Pakistan. So Pakistan is suddenly becoming a provider of weapons and exporting weapons to Sudan and Saudi Arabia as a result of this particular deal. And the Turks coming in, it will become very interesting because if you remember, during Operation Sindoor in May of last year, the Turks stood very firmly with Pakistan, and they provided drones, they provided other weapons, they also provided technical and diplomatic support quite strongly. They didn't stay in the back, but they were right out there with Azerbaijan and China standing with Pakistan. So we now see a very interesting alliance between Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan emerging. Saudi Arabia is the financier, and Pakistan. So it's very interesting. Pakistan is a nuclear power, and Turkey is the second biggest army in NATO. So you have a NATO partner. So it will be an interesting scenario to see what happens with this. And on the other side, you have the UAE-Israel partnership. There's something called I2U2. It's a quadrilateral arrangement between UAE, India, Israel, uh, two eyes, which is so India and Israel and UAE and the USA. But given the tensions between the USA and India at the moment, I think I2U2 probably is become very weak and perhaps not as relevant as the Quad is because of the tensions between India and the US and the unwillingness of Prime Minister Modi to attend any event where Donald Trump is there, the constant ribbing and abusing and insulting statements being made by Donald Trump about Prime Minister Modi and about India. So at the moment, I don't think that these minilateral institutions like the Quad, which includes India, Japan, Australia, and the US, and I2U2 becoming suddenly prominent and effective, they're not going to be ended because they are useful in some purposes, but they will be at the background. So, in that sense, you could say that UAE, given that Saudi Arabia is no more a security partner for it, is getting more and more involved with Israel. The UAE Israeli partnership is informal, even though they are members of the Abraham Accords. But their collaboration and their cooperation is more limited to Israelis providing intelligence and technology, and UAE doing all the legwork, even providing sometimes security or using proxies, especially in Yemen. So the interest that UAE has is right now securing shipping lines, and they're interested in coastal ports, etc., along the Horn of Africa, on the coast of Yemen, and they are also supporting the opposition in Sudan. And I'm sorry, I apologize for this horrible internet connection that we have. In fact, it's quite fast, but it keeps dropping. And this is one of the problems with infrastructure. Last week, I was having the same problem in Hyderabad too. So I guess hotels are shrimping on internet quality. That's quite a shame. So as I was trying to say that UAE and Saudi Arabia find themselves on opposite sides, both in Yemen as well as in Sudan. And so this new alliance between Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan should essentially provide Saudi Arabia with secure guarantees. But the unstated statement, what is unsaid about this particular alliance is that Saudi Arabia no more trusts the United States to guarantee its security. There was so much talk about Saudi Arabia getting a NATO-like security guarantee from the United States, but in return for that, the U.S. demanded that Saudi Arabia essentially signed the Abraham Accords. It's all about Israel when it comes to U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. Donald Trump may talk as much as he liked till he becomes blue. That is America First policy, but his policy in the Middle East is completely dictated by Netanyahu and all the pro-Israeli billionaires who have given him, like Miriam Adelson and others, who have given him billions and billions of dollars for his campaign. And so he's completely committed to Israel, no matter what Israel does in the Middle East. So Saudis can't potentially rely on America for security guarantees. And so they are looking at other alternatives. And Pakistan and Turkey are clearly the only two countries in the Muslim world who have some degree of professional military technology, indigenous technology. That's very important. See, you can't, no matter how much money you have, you can't be a power by just buying weapons. And if you are in the business of buying weapons and you don't have troops that are trained, and Saudi Arabia has no military experience, it hasn't fought any serious war since the 1950s, when it actually had a kind of similar contest with Egypt in the context of Yemen. So I think Saudi Arabia is seeking alternatives to America, or a backup plan for security in case there is a resurgent Iran, or in case it feels threatened by any other country. But this is a kind of interesting for both Turkey as well as for Pakistan. For Pakistan, it provides tremendous funding and new money. It is able to sell its jet fighters to Saudi Arabia and to Sudan, and it's being paid by the Saudis. So you can see an infusion of foreign currency and money into uh, uh, Pakistan's defense industry. And not only that, but it also kind of brings it closer to Turkey, where there is a lot of drone technology. Turkey is making its own fifth generation fighter plane called the Khan. And so there is now going to be potentially sharing of technology and capabilities if this alliance really goes through. And for Turkey, Turkey has for a long time has been trying to get a foothold in the Middle East, and there's no doubt that Turkey wants to be the leader in the Middle East. That's where it has been competing with Egypt and Iran and Saudi Arabia in the past few decades. Now Turkey has a strong presence in Libya and Syria. In fact, the Americans are quite grateful to Turks for basically bringing Syria under control and stabilizing Syria. So this new alliance is going to be very interesting. So for India, it is troubling. For the United States, I don't know how Americans are going to worry, because they have good relations with Saudi Arabia. America's relations with Pakistan have become better and better in the past few days. And also the relations between Turkey and the US have also improved significantly. Turkey is a NATO partner. Not that Donald Trump really cares about NATO anymore, but nevertheless, all three countries have good relations with the United States. So I don't think the US is going to be feel any. It's not going to feel threatened by this alliance, unless, of course, the Israelis tell America to jump and do something about it. Then they will do it. Uh, but for UAE, it is definitely a challenge, and so it's working very closely with Israel on this, and we will see how these realignments takes place. And of course, there is the joker in the pack, which is Qatar, and it's not very clear whether Qatar sees this development as troubling or it finds it interesting. Qatar is very close to Turkey, so will Qatar maybe later join this particular partnership? We don't know. But it is quite interesting that UAE is finding increasingly that it is in the opposite side of Saudi Arabia, not just in Yemen and Sudan, but also on the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia is not in the Abraham Accords. United Arab Emirates is in it. In fact, it is the leader. It was UAE which brought Sudan into it. So we will see what happens. Now, as far as India UAE's partnership is concerned, I mean, as I said, its partnership is more in terms of collaboration in trade and technology, security, and ports. So what happens with these three countries, with the U.S. blessing in I2U2, is more or less the funding comes from UAE, and the technology comes from Israel, and India is the beneficiary of that. They see India as a large partner, as a potential big market, and clearly, as I said, India is one of the biggest markets for Israeli weapons. If I'm not mistaken, India might be the biggest weapons market for Israel. Israel is now becoming a major source, along with Russia, U.S., France. I think Israel is the top four weapons supplier to India, and that is significant because India is the biggest purchaser of weapons these days, along with Saudi Arabia. So it is in that sense, India is kind of a source of gold mine for both UAE as well as Israel. So Israel provides technology and weapons to India, provides technology to the alliance. UAE basically provides the investments in research and partnership. And then India also provides a market where these two countries essentially send exports. UAE for a long time was the second, if not the first biggest supplier of oil before Russia became the dominant. But still, UAE, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia are the other sources of oil. Russia, at the best, is 35 to 40% of Indian oil comes from Russia. So we are seeing these new alignments, and the reason why these new alignments are emerging is because of the retreat of the United States. So the U.S. has become less and less active as a superpower. In fact, the United States, which should theoretically be the status quo power as the most dominant economic and military force in the world, it helped build, in fact, the US single-handedly build the existing global order, and has maintained it for over 75 years and has benefited profoundly by it. It should be a guarantor and stabilizer of this global order. But what we see is that the United States is now more or less a revisionist state. It is the US itself which is destroying the existing so-called rule-based order and global order. So it's creating all these vacuums, these power and security vacuums, where countries are getting very nervous about what might happen in their region if the US cannot be trusted and relied upon. And in this so-called, like, for example, people who believe that this is a multilateral world, I don't, should answer this question as to, so is Turkey a major power that Saudi Arabia is looking to? Is Pakistan a major power? Obviously, they're not. So the major powers, the so-called major powers in an imaginary multilateral world, other than the US, are Russia, China, Europe, Japan, and India. France also thinks it's a power. But none of these countries are looking to any of these countries for security and guarantee. So that tells you that other than the US in the Middle East, today there are other countries which are stepping up, especially regional powers. With the decline of Egypt and Iran, we see the emergence of uh, non-Arab and non-Middle Eastern powers exercising more influence there, especially Pakistan and Turkey. So this is an interesting development. It is indicative of the changing global order. It is going to be challenging indirectly to India because this is going to definitely strengthen Pakistan. Pakistan's economy will become a bit more stable because if Saudi Arabia is going to rely on Pakistani military and Pakistan as a security guarantor for it, and also as a proxy in places like Gaza, as well as Sudan and other places, then it would want a more stable and secure and stronger Pakistan. So you can expect Saudi Arabia to be investing in Pakistan's military capabilities. And I think that there is such a lot of ideological convergence between the Turks and the Pakistanis at the moment that you can see that they can help each other in military technology, sharing of weapons, etc. And Turkey has proved itself during Operation Sindoor. So for the Indian defense thinkers and for the India's strategic community, this is something of a headache for them to worry about. to think about and see what happens. For India, this is also a problem because this is the second trilateral that Pakistan has become part of in the past few months. One is the trilateral with Turkey and Saudi Arabia that I've been talking about, and the other is the trilateral with China and Bangladesh. So now Pakistan has two strategic trilaterals on both sides of India. That doesn't mean that Pakistan can threaten India's capabilities other than through, shall we say, non-regular warfare, but it is something to worry about, something to think about. So I'm going to stop with that, with my commentary on this development. For those of you who watch Conversations but have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, press the bell icon, but also consider becoming a member of Conversations, because I do have Zoom conferences with all members periodically, and we have wonderful exchanges. I get ideas and feedback from members, and we also discuss things that I sometimes don't talk about on the show. So now, if there are any quick critical questions or comments, I'll be happy to read them and announce them. So there's a question here from Superbman001. Not sure, but should India enter into some kind of military alliance with the United Arab Emirates? I would not recommend that. India has good relations with both UAE, with all the countries in the region which are competitors with Iran. India has good relations. It is the US which is preventing India and Iran from becoming stronger partners in economic, energy, as well as military arena, because of, like I said, the US is a servant of Israel when it comes to the Middle East. But India does have good relations with Iran, with UAE, with Qatar, with Saudi Arabia. It's the only tension that India has in the Middle East is with Turkey. So why would India then align itself with one country and lose relations, the positive relations that it has with Saudi Arabia? So I would not recommend. I think India should maintain whatever it wants to call it, strategic autonomy, non-alignment, or multi-alignment with all countries, and not get into the regional warfare. Plus, India has historically stayed out of the security architecture of the Middle East because of the dominant presence of India, of the US. So I would, Superman, I would not recommend. And I think India right now has too many other headaches on its plate that it would not want to add another one. Okay, this seems to be an interesting question. So, right, sir, will Venezuela's action forces China to go more towards renewables, and this will decrease the oil prices more and more? Well, that's a very interesting question, because China is going to be one of the biggest losers from what Donald Trump did in Venezuela. China has given loans, about $2 billion or more. I don't remember the exact figure. It's either 2 billion or 11 billion, but lots of money that China has given to Venezuela, and the collateral was oil, essentially. So if Venezuela fails to pay the loan, China would have had access to Venezuelan oil. And they were getting oil from Venezuela at discounted prices because of the sanctions. The same kind of a deal as it had with Russia. But now Donald Trump has taken the collateral away. So if Venezuela cannot pay back its loans to China, China can take nothing away from Venezuela, because the US will now control, for the near future, not only control but manage and market Venezuelan oil. Secondly, the discounted prices at which Venezuela was selling its oil, it won't be able to do that anymore. The US is not going to sell it at cheaper prices, because the reason why Venezuela was given the discount, because it was getting around the US sanctions, like Russia. So while the market is glutted, the increased production by Venezuela is not going to help anybody. It might just reduce the price of oil further. It's go below $60. So I don't think that oil producing countries are going to be happy with increased production from Venezuela. Plus, the US also does not need oil from Venezuela. So, what the US is probably going to do is going to target Russian oil supplies. And so this is going to be basically both China and Russia are going to suffer because of what the US has done in Venezuela. India used to buy Venezuelan oil like the Iranian oil. India seems to like to buy oil from countries which are under sanctions because they get them at a discount. So the latest news is that Ambani's Reliance is already trying to negotiate. They have already stepped up. It's out there. You can actually Google and read the news that Reliance is already trying to get some kind of a permission or a permit from the US to buy Venezuelan oil, which means that if they to basically replace the Russian oil that they were buying. So this is going to be bad for Russia and China. For India, India could indirectly benefit in the sense that it could buy Venezuelan oil, and if the production in Venezuela increases, it might bring down the standard market price of oil. So then it could buy UAE oil where the transportation cost is less with the oil prices going down because of the presence of Venezuelan oil in the market. So yes, it is going to have a very interesting impact on the oil market, no doubt about it. What is this question? Previously, the US blocked purchase of Chinese walkie-talkies. How could US allow sophisticated weapons that must integrate with for the Pakistanis, I suppose. I don't know who you are talking about. Uh, I don't know. I wish I could answer that question from you. Uh, this is a funny question. I don't think though. Trump is not interested. See, the particular law under which Gautam Adani is wanted by the US is the Foreign Corruption Act. So some Western countries did pass laws prohibiting their companies, like European companies and American companies, from bribing local officials to get contracts. So if there's a contract, uh, I mean, Gautam Adani is accused of partnering with an American company and giving bribes, I think, to the chief minister of Andhra Pradesh and another minister. So that is illegal. And Trump doesn't like that law. Trump says that because we are not able to give bribes to get contracts, we are less competitive compared to China, that China has no problem in giving bribes. Here I'm in Sri Lanka, and when I talk about what is China's role and presence here, people say, you know how China operates, and our previous government was okay with that. Basically, they're trying to tell me that Rajapaksa and the others were taking lots of bribes from China and giving China whatever China wanted. And this is a problem for Trump. Trump says this puts Americans at a disadvantage. So as soon as he became president the second time, he told Pam Bondi, the attorney general, not to open any new cases of foreign corruption and to go slow on the existing cases. That's why Gautam Adani seems to be a bit safe, because Trump doesn't like this law. He's trying to get rid of the law, but he's not able to do that because it'll have to go through Congress and Senate, etc. But what he can do is tell the Attorney General, simply do not prosecute that. That's why Gautam Adani is safe. And so I don't think Trump has any interest in going after Gautam Adani and picking him up. But if a Democratic president comes in 2028, then all those cases will be revived with a vengeance, because they will try to do things which are opposite, and that will definitely hurt. But whatever it is, Gautam Adani, I think, has lost the capacity to raise funds in the New York stock market, and it has definitely hurt him. Absolutely. They've been talking about it for a long time, but they seem to fight themselves more brutally. Look at Sudan. There's a civil war going on in Sudan. And look at Afghanistan and Pakistan. They both call themselves Islamic Emirate and Islamic Republic. They are on the verge of a war. And believe it or not, if you remember just 2 years ago, both Iran and Pakistan bombed each other in a way. Iran. They both bomb Baloch rebels, but in each other's countries. So there seems to be an inability about Muslim countries to come on the same page, even though OIC has existed for a long time. It has never acquired any teeth. And this talk of an Islamic, they would talk about an Islamic NATO or a Sunni NATO or an Arab NATO. None of them has been working. It's not easy for countries. Look at India. India has failed to make SARC a serious and important institution. Every region in the world has a pretty good free trade agreement. Even the Caribbean has a pretty good regional organization. Even Africa has African Union, which works on both uh, commerce interests as well as security interests much better than SARC. ASEAN, of course, is terrific. European Union has done some incredible things in terms of unification. And then even NAFTA 2.0 is pretty big in terms of the free trades that were taking place. But India was, in spite of its leadership, in spite of all the intellectual capital that India has, it has not been able to get over its problems with Pakistan and create SARC. So, and similarly, the Muslim world, it has not gone beyond the Arab League and OIC and the useless organizations. So the chances of an Islamic or a Muslim NATO emerging, no, plus the US will not allow because it will become very potent. I did do a show where I estimated that the total GDP of the Muslim world is about 12 to 15 trillion dollars. So it will be, very close competitor to the European Union in the size of the economy. The population obviously is close to 2 billion. So it will be bigger than Christian world. And the amount of soldiers and military that they have is very, very powerful. The defense budgets are huge, bigger than China's. And in fact, the number of soldiers in the current total Muslim world are in the excess of 9 million. So about an army of nearly 1 crore people. So it is powerful. Plus, it's a nuclear collaboration. It will be a nuclear institution because of Pakistan. But I don't think it is politically possible, at least in the near future, unless all of the Muslim world become democratic. Yes, things have become a bit normal, but there was a time when Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf countries basically imposed sanctions on Qatar and blockaded Qatar, and it was having a bad time. This is a global problem. If I had a formula on how to handle Donald Trump, I think I would be a very rich person. I would have my own studio and not relying on the horrible internet. In fact, I have thought of taking Starlink, Elon Musk's internet, but it's very expensive. I can't afford it. But how to handle Trump? I think the best way to handle Trump is to massage his ego and not irritate him and stay out of his way. The only person who has stood up to him and really pushed him back has been Xi Jinping, but only China has the capabilities that China has. The European countries together, if they work together, they are just as powerful as China economically speaking, but EU is unable to stand up to the US because it depends on the US. China does not depend on the US. That's the difference. EU depends, Europeans depend on the US for their security, and they have huge trade relations. So they are all subservient. And India tried to outsmart the US and it failed. And you can see its inability to get a trade agreement. And now, on a daily basis, Trump keeps insulting Modi as well as India. And a very important and strategic partnership between India and the US is being undermined because India is not handling Trump very well. So it's going to be tricky. The Europeans have tried their best to deal with him. If you notice, in the early days, even people like Viktor Orban were very close to Donald Trump. The Italian Prime Minister Meloni was very close to him, but they have no influence on him. So being close to Trump means that, okay, you are not on the firing line, but you don't have the kind of influence you would like to have on Trump or US policy. Oh, this is an interesting question. Thank you very much. What could we do to stop Pakistan becoming Chinese frontman in the Middle East? That's an interesting thing. The question really is Pakistan a Chinese frontman, or is Pakistan now a US frontman in the Middle East? Because it's playing with both. Uh, in November, I was in China, and one question I did ask every geopolitics scholar and professor that I met was how do you see the growing Pakistan-US relations? Because the closer Pakistan gets with America and the more confident it becomes on its partnership with the US, the more strategic autonomy it has towards China. So that they said, oh no, our relationship is very strong. It is tested and proven relationship. We have always supported Pakistan, so Pakistan knows that China is always there, and and Pakistan is also a bridge between the U.S. and China. So they kept saying that they were not really worried about it. And in fact, just last week, Xi Jinping kind of put pressure on Pakistan, saying there will be no more funds available, no more financial assistance to Pakistan unless there is some progress on all the commitments that Pakistan made about CPEC. CPEC is the biggest investment of Belt and Road Initiative, over $60 billion, and it looks flop. It looks like a flop. I did visit the Colombo port and kind of drove around it and took a look at it. And from all the discussions, even the Colombo port, also for that matter, the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, which are all part of the Belt and Road Initiative, have not been as successful either for China or for the local countries. So I'm not very sure, but Pakistan is milking it at the moment because it seems to be winning big lotteries and small lotteries without any smart foreign policy. Just these things are falling in its lap. The Saudi need for security guarantee and alternative, and so it reaches out to Pakistan. This is where India failed, and because of the anti-Muslim posture of Modi and all the BJP, etc. I think many Muslim countries, while they do want to have good relations with India, are reluctant to trust Modi and the BJP on in a very serious way in terms of security. So that's why Pakistan is benefiting by default. Oh wow, that's a very interesting question, but I'm not very sure. MBS is proving to be quite smart and sophisticated, and hats off to him the way he stood. Apparently, for an hour and a half, Donald Trump in private put a lot of pressure on MBS to sign the Abraham Accords when he was here, and he didn't move. He absolutely did not move. And yes, that might kind of prompt the Israelis to knock him off before he becomes king. But I'm not very sure the US. Donald Trump might tell the Israelis, do what you need to do, but it would be very destabilizing to the Saudis. And Americans don't want a destabilized Saudi Arabia. So you already have Iraq, Syria, Iran, too many headaches in the region. Yes, Jilani Saab. I think Trump has given up hope of winning a new Nobel Prize. If you notice, he doesn't talk about it anymore. So I think he's just going to go after whatever he wants. He hasn't mentioned the Panama Canal, but I think right now Rubio and JD Vance are negotiating with Denmark about Greenland. So we can see some progress from the American point of view on Greenland very soon. And he has indicated that he's very serious about it. And I think next would be the Panama Canal. And then we'll see what else comes to his mind if he's serious about Canada itself. So yes, and all of that, if he sends troops into Denmark, then clearly there's no chance of him ever winning a Nobel Prize. And I think he knows that too. If I'm not mistaken, the nominations for 2026 are also over and he's not in it. So the chances of him winning the 2026 Nobel Prize is also gone, I think. Good questions, Subhaba. I think I already answered that. Anyway, so that's the end of the questions. Thank you, everybody, for watching Conversations. Like this video, press the bell icon, subscribe to the channel, and then share this with others. And finally, the internet has stabilized, and we are able to have a conversation. Take care, everybody. Thank you.